Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Peace Islands Institute. It is a great pleasure and honor to have you all here with us today. Our panel today is Global Cyber Threats to National Security. How will cyber attacks jeopardize the future of national security related to financial fraud, cyber espionage, EM threats, and military security? We have a great program and speakers here for you today. Now I'd like to welcome Mr. Mehmet Kılıç, Director for the Center for Global Affairs at the Peace Islands Institute, for his opening remarks.
Thank you so much. Again, good afternoon and welcome to the Peace Islands Institute. I'm so honored and humbled to have you all with us this afternoon. Peace Islands Institute, New York, is the headquarters for 6 branches in the East Coast region of America. So we have one in New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut, Boston, Pennsylvania, and here is the headquarters for these centers. Peace Islands Institute is a nonprofit organization which is dedicated to promote unity for peace building, education for ignorance, welfare for poverty and hunger, and progress for development worldwide. Peace Islands Institute aims to develop original and alternative perspectives on the global and social phenomena as they relate to our lives. The ultimate goal is to present explanations and solutions and support successful practices in order to achieve world peace by creating the realms of peaceful coexistence, or we call it Peace Islands. We are living in a world that everything around us is changing constantly. People, society is changing, technology is changing, the means for telecommunication is changing as well. For example, if you think of 50 years before now, we were using the rotary phones instead of using the wireless smartphones for communication. We had black and white television sets, and not everybody had the privilege to watch the television programs or the news. And we had a few TV stations and networks. We were using Morse code for military communication. People were traveling by cars and ships for transportation. It took weeks from Americas to Europe, and it took months from Americas to China and India to travel. But now, after 50 years, we're using cell phones, wireless smartphones that we connect with people all over the world in seconds. We had color televisions, LCD screen with higher resolution, and you can watch hundreds of TV channels from all over the world with many different languages. We're using World Wide Web, the internet, for telecommunications. We're using emails, texts, Facebook, Twitter, Yahoo, Google, and also Professor Wikipedia, right? Transportation has become very easy, and now it is only like 5 hours or 6 hours to any European country, or it is like 18 to 20 hours from New York to China or India. There was print media, but now there is social media. Social media now is as powerful as the print media. For example, the social media was one of the major catalyzers for the Arab Spring in the Middle East and North Africa. World citizens and nations are interdependent. That global economic crisis in Europe impacts not only the Wall Street, our stock markets in Wall Street, but also it impacts on the stock market in China, in Europe, all over the world. But however, there is one important change that jeopardizes our national security, our economy, and our solvency, and that is global cyber threat. Criminals, hackers, terrorists create programs to collect personal and classified government information for their criminal acts. Today's panel will provide useful information about these threats facing private sector, but at the same time governmental institutions, dedicated to preserving a level of privacy and security often intruded by hackers and other cyber criminals. The speakers will also address how to be proactive against cyber crimes. I would like to thank our moderator and also our speakers for being with us, sharing their knowledge, experience with us. And also, I would like to thank you all for being with us. And I hope today's panel would be as enjoyable, informative, and also enjoyable to you. And that would give different perspectives on our understanding of global cyber threat. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Klich. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce you the moderator of the panel. Mr. David P. Michaels is the elected first Vice President and Chairman Events Committee of the Foreign Press Association. Founded in 1918, the Foreign Press Association represents about 400 members of the foreign media based in the United States of America. He is the principal of David P. Michaels Strategic Solutions, the economic and political strategist, and has over 35 years of experience as a personal advisor and a mentor to the heads of state, chairmen, presidents, and CEOs of international entities. He is a consultant to major private sector corporations, governmental entities, and political leaders on matters associated with business, economic and political restructuring, strategic problem resolution, and the related financial and economic negotiations. Mr. Michaels is a senior advisor to Strategic Communications Laboratories, or SCL. SCL is a multidisciplinary behavioral research and innovation agency established to address the need for a scientific and verifiable approach to often life-critical communication campaigns, such as conflict transformation and humanitarian disasters.
Good afternoon to you all. I think we're in for a rather interesting panel today. Our first speaker is Dr. Roger von Hanveer, who is a global strategist at Method Limited from the United Kingdom. Dr. Hanveer is a New York-based financial industry executive with a distinguished prior career in both government and the academia. He served in diverse high-level defense sector advisory positions and commands acknowledged expertise in articulating the impact of defense technology intelligence and surprise, inclusive cyber and space-based threats, the geopolitical dynamics of NBCE capabilities, as well as the calculus of conflict to senior decision makers. His present area of focus in defense analysis is the impact on game-changing regional security paradigms and the potential for technology-driven asymmetrical financial conflict through electronic measures. Quite a mouthful, I'm sure we'll have an explanation later. He has held senior faculty appointments at Johns Hopkins and George Mason Universities, in addition to directing the NBC Threat Studies colloquia in the MBT program at Georgetown University from 1997 to 2003. His background in development of detection and interdiction strategies against NBCE elements, I assume that stands for National Broadcasting Executives Elements. I know, I'm just teasing. We have to add a little humor. Throughout the global security landscape are well known, as is his expertise on global conflict resolution, emerging WMD, proliferant threats, and electronic financial conflict. Dr. Hanveer is also a well-known international television commentator. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hanveer.
Try to spend a few brief moments on the basic introduction to the concept of cyber and electromagnetic threats in our society today. And basically, the landscape of threats today internationally are very multipolar. We are out of the Cold War. There are multiple nation states with potential interests to disrupt the communication and information technology infrastructure of the traditional developed world. Such nations, for instance in the Shanghai Eight, may have motives to ally themselves with supranational entities, with cartels. They may have totally divergent motives, but at some point during a sudden crisis, those motives may converge, and the cyber EM scenario may be attractive. Let's just cover a little bit of the nomenclature because these terms are bandied about and we need to understand what they mean. We've all grown up with the concept of a computer virus, and it's basically a self-executable piece of code, or it is associated with an executable file and macros. And generally, the Apple operating systems have been relatively invulnerable to this threat. Well, the virus has sort of gone out of phase, and we're now dealing with worms and Trojans. Worms are basically totally independent files that are self-functioning, that have their own internal operating system, and that can rapidly spread throughout networks and data clouds, which are emerging globally today. They are by far the greatest threat. They include logic bombs. Trojans are imposter files that we invite onto our systems, often without realizing it, that can behave like worms. And finally, the term botnet you will see appear, and it's essentially the recruitment of an innocent computer network and its units by a malicious force to execute such worms throughout the system so that there's a false flag effect. You don't know where the real threat is coming from, and an innocent set of infrastructures is utilized as the executor of the threat. Statistics, in 2010, 286 million malware threat events per month. In 2010, a major game-changing event, the Stuxnet worm infiltrated into the Iranian nuclear program, successfully sent the centrifuge cascades enriching uranium into an explosive cascade spin rate that destroyed part of the facility. The first time in documented history that a worm, an algorithm, had been used in an act of war by an unknown force. The cyber threats that we have are of particular concern because of the evolution of the data cloud now in our technology base and our information technology infrastructure. How many of you use iPhones, iPads? You all have communicated with the cloud. Increasingly, your phones, your iPads no longer have sufficient memory to store all your data, your addresses. They go to some invisible data collection around the world. And at some point, all your personal data will be stored off your device. Those data clouds are highly vulnerable. There's already been a major event. How many of you use Skype? You will recall that Skype crashed about a year ago. It crashed because the data cloud was violated. So that demonstrated the vulnerability of data clouds. The Stuxnet worm has shown us that such data cloud entry, and actually the entry of entire networks and facilities, are now vulnerable. The Stuxnet worm, of which you will hear a great deal perhaps even today, is targeted at the controllers that operate machinery, computers, air conditioning systems, power grids, buses, trains, centrifuges, water supplies, food supply processing. They target the actual machinery that runs society, not just the computers, and that makes them even more dangerous. In 2006, President Ahmadinejad of the Islamic Republic of Iran was shown the design and the layout of the impending 3,000 centrifuge strong facility for enriching uranium for the first Iranian nuclear weapon. And a great mistake was made by his security forces. You will see on the back of the computer screen on the right the actual schematic of the centrifuge cascade. Well, when the Stuxnet worm was analyzed, its structure was exactly parallel to that centrifuge cascade. The worm itself was introduced by an agent within the centrifuge facility using a small flash drive and was propagated to each centrifuge logic controller and was then triggered by itself. It had a pre-programmed level of code that allowed itself to be auto-triggering to bring the cascade down and set back their program by about 3 years. The next worm already on the scene appears to be a successor, the Dooku, discovered by a venerable computer science institute in Budapest, Hungary. And this worm targets information systems for subversion. It enters them to gather information transmit that information elsewhere, and to modulate or corrupt the information in the system, preparing the network, the factory, the organization, whatever the target is, for the subsequent entry of a destructive worm like Stuxnet. They clearly have emanated from the same source. Where do these worms come from? Well, clearly they require great knowledge and sophistication. Governments, industrial cartels that have the capital necessary to hire the top-tier expertise, or the very companies that manufacture and design our antiviral software. In fact, the Russian-based labs of Kaspersky, which is a major supplier of antiviral software, are one of the prime suspects for the origin of the Stuxnet worm, and not the Mossad, as many people believe. The financial markets here in New York. What could happen? You've all heard about the events of Facebook on Friday. And aside from the issue of the error in judgment that a syndicate trade was overvalued, which any reasonable banker would have known, and I refuse to let our banking institution even have anything to do with Facebook. But that's not the issue. The issue is that the trading mechanics failed. Orders were given and not executed because of the volume trades that brought the system to a halt. It was a technical glitch, which underscores the vulnerability of our trading system. Where are the problems where a worm could be inserted through hedge funds, through banks? Let me give you an example. An opponent, an adversary, could start multiple small hedge funds in Kansas, in Chicago, in Dubai, in Buenos Aires, wherever. And this could be highly organized, but they could be decentralized. They would not communicate with each other. Their strategy and their timing would be worked out ahead of time. But beyond that point, they would not communicate. At a given point in time, they would all begin to execute orders and send worms into the system through their electronic orders that were sent to the major exchanges and the brokerages. These worms would join up and cross-propagate in the clouds and the systems, and they would begin to change the dynamics, the rhythmicity, the timing in nanoseconds of the trades, thereby bringing the system to a screeching halt, because the flow of execution would overwhelm the computers or would desynchronize the entire systems on the exchanges. There could be false signals generated that would say that far greater cash was available or far less cash than was actually in the system. Orders could be given that would lead to diversion or movement of liquidity offshore or between countries in ways that was not intended, thus markedly perturbing the value of currencies. And finally, symbolic learning techniques would be used by the self-configuring worms in a way that, for instance, orders would be given for one hedge fund to trade, and then immediately the same orders would be given to trade in the opposite direction by another surrogate fund, thereby canceling out the trades and leading the market into chaos. The ultimate cyclicity and disruption of the market would cause panic, and this would be the ultimate objective, which would basically bring the market to a close. And finally, these attacks, and we have too much light here, could be generated by an attacker going through recruited networks that became parasitized, the so-called botnets. They were utilized without anyone realizing that they were recruited, and the actual orders would come from those false flagged hedge funds or banks without realizing that they had been recruited by an actual attacker, and then those in turn would attack the target. What kind of countermeasures? Well, this gets very complicated, but the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency has developed a number of approaches in the defense sector, just in a nutshell, that appear to protect our force information technology structures out in the field very effectively to such reconfiguring worms. But these new technologies developed by DARPA have not even migrated into the defense community. Then I'd like to switch for a second before I close to talk about the hardware aspect. Our government, our industry, our banks have to be supplied with computers, with laptops, with cell phones. Those phones are made in countries abroad that are potential military adversaries. What if the intelligence services of such countries were to pre-position malware and worms inside the semiconductors or the circuits of the devices that we bought from them? And these were then timed to activate at some point in the future. And what if our government, was vulnerable to the intrusion of such devices into our most sensitive infrastructures in the National Security Agency, the FBI? I was just very honored to be given a medallion from the FBI, which is made in China. Without singling out any country, what if our country were buying computers and we were pre-infected with malware that could go off 10 years from now? Well, fortunately, we're smarter than that. And we have dedicated electron beam scanners, which I was honored to work on when I was in the Pentagon, and X-ray diffraction systems that scan every single computer, every single cell phone that goes into sensitive institutions in the government. The banks don't do that, though. Industry doesn't do that. Only certain agencies in the government. So that's an area that people are going to have to look at in the future. And then finally, I want to talk about something entirely different. How many of you remember the Kosovo conflict? Okay. Quite surprisingly, for such insurgency conflicts, we won that conflict. But we won it because we defeated Belgrade on 2 nights. And we did that because we took a modern European city that was dependent on electricity, transportation, water, televisions, and we brought it into the 19th century. We did that with electromagnetic warfare. We dropped weaponry that didn't kill people, it didn't destroy buildings, but it saturated the city with high energy pulses, similar to lightning. And they destroyed all electrical and computer systems. Belgrade is still recovering from that. Now that was achieved by weaponry, but it can also be achieved, so it was achieved by dropping weapons from aircraft, but it can also be achieved by a handheld device that costs $70,000 to manufacture, has no restricted components, and I can buy them all at Radio Shack. It's called a flux compression generator, and it's basically, in simplest terms, a conductor wrapped around a non-conductor with an explosive in the center that drives a high charge that's generated in the center of the device into a tiny space, thereby generating an electromagnetic pulse which is similar to a burst of lightning. If such a device were to go off in this room and be placed here surreptitiously by a custodian at night, the television studio from which I broadcast on the 13th floor, which is one of the critical studios for the entire city, services all the major networks, Media 3, it's on the 13th floor. They would be knocked out instantaneously, and they would be unrecoverable. They could never broadcast again. All their chips, their conducting surfaces, everything would be depolarized. Now, we would not want to be in the proximity of such a device here because it would be dangerous for us, obviously. The implosion would take out this room. But the bottom line is thousands of such devices could be placed at critical locations. They would not be detected. They're not radioactive. They're not biological. And if in a concerted effort they were in a crisis, in a war crisis, they were to be detonated, they would take our infrastructure out overnight and send us back into the 19th century. A great deal has been written about electromagnetic pulse, and it's been ignored by the banking community. But it's perhaps our greatest vulnerability. So there's the algorithmic software side, and there's the hardware side with off-the-shelf technology. I rarely talk about this, but this is the type of venue where this is appropriate. And that concludes my remarks. The threat is real. The threat is achievable. The entry barriers are low. They are not comparable to the complexity and difficulty of designing a nuclear weapon. They do require sophistication, but they're quite achievable and they're very difficult to trace. Thank you very much.
Most interesting. I hope everybody switched off their cell phone. Our next speaker is Amit Kachia Patel, who has been a special agent with the FBI New York office for 8 years. Special Agent Patel specialized in foreign counterintelligence matters with the FBI for the past 7 years with a focus on technology. Currently, he's involved with cyber investigations related to national security. Throughout his career, he's been recognized with numerous awards within the United States intelligence community. Please help join me in welcoming him.
Thank you for inviting me today here to speak. Unfortunately, I don't have any props or a PowerPoint to go along with some of the talking points that I really want to go ahead and talk about. One of the things you may be wondering is, what is an agent that's worked counterintelligence for roughly the last 7 years working cyber matters? And I think the important thing to understand is when we think of cyber matters, we usually think about the bits and bytes that are behind a lot of the cyber attacks. So, as the doctor alluded to, the Trojans, the worms, those types of things, but we don't actually think about the actual people who are behind the computers that are conducting a lot of these attacks. And so what we're trying to do here at the FBI now is take folks that have a background in intelligence and use those philosophies that are used for basically catching spies, for lack of a better term, to go ahead and address the cyber threat. And so that's where traditional CI meets cyber. So traditional CI usually involves a lot of legwork in that, a traditional intelligence service, whether it's, for example, the Mossad, the SVR, wherever they are, boots on the ground, trying to go out and develop assets and a human base for information for their intelligence gathering. What cyber does is it flattens the playing field, and it makes that very, very easy. So whereas you may spend years trying to develop agents to get at classified information, with cyber you can get that information literally within a matter of weeks, depending upon how sophisticated you are. And so I don't know if everyone's familiar with the book by Tom Friedman, The Lexus and the Olive Tree. There's a good chapter in there about super empowered individuals, and that's sort of the age that we're entering into now, where the cost of setting up a cyber warfare apparatus is very low. Cuba can go ahead and set up a cyber warfare apparatus just as well as Russia and be just as effective. All it takes is the brains and the technology to go ahead and do it. And so the cost and the availability have basically gone in opposite directions, where the cost has lowered over the last 10 years and the availability of cyber tools are available to everyone. And so that's what we're trying to do here in the FBI, is to go ahead and look at it from the perspective of the people that are behind the emerging threats. And so that's what the FBI's role is to go out into the private sector and go ahead and make people aware of the threat. And that's really what it's going to take to go ahead and actually address the cyber threat, is a public-private partnership. There's a lot of legislation. We were speaking earlier about this. Obviously everything that the government does, a lot of it's classified, and so it's difficult to do a lot of the sharing of information that the public or the private sector needs in order to go ahead and address the threat. And so there's legislation that's being worked on now. I'm sure we'll hear more about it in the news once the election cycle is over, to go ahead and establish a more of a coherent dialogue between the public and private sector. And the private sector, to its credit, has come a long way, along with the government as well, in being able to go ahead and being able to address the threat. But fundamentally, the threat to the private sector as well as to the public sector comes down to two things, in which is awareness and cost. And so and that's one of the things I think that we're seeing as a trend in the cyber arena, is the big players in the private sector and in the public sector are going to be able to go ahead and take care of themselves. They have not unlimited resources, but they have the resources to go ahead and spend the money that it would take to go ahead and address the cyber threat. It's these mid to lower level players that are not able to go ahead and afford the money to go ahead and have the cyber infrastructure set up to be able to address the threat. So for example, whereas a financial institution is doing a financial merger or a deal, they're going to use a law firm They're going to use firms to go ahead and come in and do their due diligence. The cyber actors and the cyber threat countries are very aware of this, and rather than targeting the actual financial institution themselves, they would rather go ahead and target the law firms, and then as well as some of the due diligence companies to go ahead and get the same information that they could, would take them weeks, if not months, to get from the actual bigger financial institution. And so that is a huge problem. And I think what we're seeing as we're able to go out and take down the walls of communication, we'll see a lot more sharing as it relates to cyber as a whole. And then some of the newer emerging threats related to cyber, like I said, are these middle to lower level players. So that's it.
Fine. Thank you. Our next speaker is Can Ildisley. Excuse me if I didn't quite pronounce that correctly. He is a freelance malware analyst with a strong background in the computer security field for more than 9 years. He is specialized in botnets and cryptology. To his credit, he is also the grand champion in the United States Department of Defense Cyber Crime Center Digital Forensics Challenge of 2011. He holds a master's in computer science from the Sabansi University and is completing his PhD in computer science at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute with a specialization in civil cyber defense systems. He serves on the executive board of the Turkish Students Association at RPI. Please join me in welcoming.
Is it working? Okay. Welcome everyone, and thanks for inviting me. I have a lot of slides today, so I'll just need to find it first.
You've been attacked.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you about the underground economy, take you to the world of hackers, and tell you about their motivation, so why they do it. And all you need to remember about this talk is this mice over there. The mice is composed of 4 components: money, ideology, coercion, and ego. So these are the main reasons of hackers for doing illegal things. So I'll try to explain every piece in detail, starting with the money, of course. It's one of the main reasons of hackers for doing these jobs. So in this crime scene, the malware developers are the guys who just develop that malicious software and delivers it to some other guys to use it. They are like at low risk because they just code the malware and sell it to other hackers. But selling a malware is like you get $5,000 on average, and for each customer. So you can just develop a single piece of software and sell it to as many clients as you want. And in New York City, a security consultant gets $100K per year, and it's like $4,000 monthly after tax. And coding a malware is an easy task. You can just do it less than a week. So you can sell it to at least 10 people per month on the average. It's based on experience. At the moment with an FBI agent there. And you can just get like $50,000 per month by just developing a piece of malware. These guys, most of them are not using that malware. Yeah. The black hats, or you call crackers, or the other illegal guys, they just take this malware And suppose that now you're a black hat and you get this malware, and you need to spread this malware to people. So you will infect their computers. Now you will pay $5,000 to the guy who developed this malware. Now you will need to spread it to other computers. So how you do it? Or just like you got an antivirus, but hackers have a solution for that too. So you go back to your shop, the malware developer, and you ask for a program called a cryptor, and it makes any malware undetectable to all antiviruses. And it's $50. And you can calculate the cost of an antivirus for a company, so you make the math. So now your malware is completely undetectable to antiviruses, and you are ready to distribute it. And the malware helps you because it has like spreading mechanism in itself, so it will just spread itself to other computers too. But you can just make it faster by just distributing it with like sharing sites or some other methods. But if you want it like to infect more machines in a short time, there's another tool for that called exploit pack. So this costs around like $2,000 or more, and you can just get it from your shop, the malware developer again. And you install this script into a site. What it does is if anyone visits that site, the site will try to infect the machine with some common vulnerabilities. So if you're using like old operating system or any program which has an old version itself, you'll just get infected. So you all know the links that people send to each other, like mails, or you get messages from instant messengers with a link, and you click that link and it will direct you to the exploit pack. But if you do not have like that many visitors, people also sell traffic. What it means that they just directing visitors to your site, and they don't know anything about that. So you can get like 10,000 people per day, around $300. So you can like create your own botnet. So this is the botnet that the last two talks we've been talking about that. The bots are your machines, the compromised machines, and the attacker issues a command to the command and control server on top, and that server just distributes that command to all of the bots. And if he wants your credit card numbers or anything, he just sends a command, and all credit card numbers are collected back to the CNC server. This is another architecture for the botnet. So now you have the botnet and you want to monetize it. So there are a lot of different techniques, but I don't have time to explain all of them in detail. So the fraud is one of the most important things here that I'd like to talk about. So the malware is specialized in capturing your credit card numbers. So after you get the credit card numbers, you can either sell to people or you can just use it yourself. If you try to sell to other hackers, so your credit card costs around $5, maybe less, if you can find some other like shops. American Express costs $6. It's a bit expensive. And if you like get a lot of cards, like massive amount of cards, you get a nice discount from the shops. People are just confused. They don't think it's real. So I'm going to show you a site here. That's a shop. And you can buy cards. See, you can, like, it's a nice shopping site. Some shopping sites are like worse than that. So you have a lot of credit card numbers there. I have a moment with the FBI agent there. So. But there's just like XXS there. I guess it's not that bad. So you just pick the credit card numbers you want, and you just click buy now, and you'll get all these numbers. So they have like search by state, search by country, search by bank, and this is just a small shop. There are like millions of sites like that. And all these sites are like, they have a secret invitation system, which are distributed to all hackers. You get a code, and you can only join them with that code or something. If you want to cash out, this is the difficult part. You just go to eBay, and you just like buy something. The risk is your address will be there, so people can find you. So in order to avoid it, you'll find the drop guys in the markets. These drop guys are mostly from European countries, not from US. What you do is you just give their address instead of yours, and they'll risk their lives and send the shipment back to you. So as a hacker, you're on the second hop, and what you pay is, if you buy an iPod or an iPad, you'll give one to the drop guy. But it's not important. It's not your card anyways. So what you do is you just buy 2 of them, whatever you just order. And another cashing out mechanisms are online gaming sites, like online poker. People just join some poker sites which are not protected. Some of them are heavily protected. What you do is you just put your money to the poker table and join to that table with another player. That's again you, and you lose all your money in a hand. So it's hard to track those transactions. And like multiplayer games, a recent game came out which has like you can put your money into the online game and cash it out from somewhere else. And you can convert the money online. There are a lot of e-currencies now, Liberty Reserve, Web Money, Russian e-currency. Yeah, I don't want to tell you about it more, but you can just convert and convert and convert and lose your trace. Another motivation is the ideology. All you know about the anonymous group. This is called hacktivism. It's hacking for a cause. So some group of like kids, we can call them, collaborate and attack government to prove something, or just to say that the government is bad, so let's attack this side. What they do is the denial of service attack. It's a pretty simple attack. You just click a button and your computer sends packets to a site. The power of this comes from you control thousands of computers. Remember the botnet that you built? So you just give a command to send packets. So all these computers, so your computers infected, send packets to a site, and it becomes unavailable to respond to other legal requests. So the media takes it, and you will see the news like Anonymous hacked some very important site. And what you see is like Anonymous just did a very big thing, but the thing is they just reboot the server and everything like, okay again. These are another incidents, and the motivation is ideology. Started like 2000, that was the one I found. That 16-year Canadian boy attacked with a denial of service attack using a botnet. And Russian activists, you can see a lot of Russian botnets in those ideological attacks. And the Anonymous, they created a tool for people. You just get the tool and join to the Anonymous for their attacks. This is an important thing for the cyber warfare. The other motivation is coercion. I put the name coercion, but it's like using hackers for the cyber warfare. We mostly covered it for the past 2 talks. So I'll just try to skip it. This is a more complex design of a botnet. I'm showing this because the botnets can be used as a weapon for cyber warfare. So we can have a legitimate volunteer botnet to protect or for like proactive mechanism. Because like botnets, they have all the properties of a moving target defense. So these giant networks, we can use it for both protection or they can be used as a deadly weapon in the hands of a hacker. And the other thing is ego. That's like kids do it for ego, attacking the other guys while playing games is the less important part. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much again for coming to this very wonderful event. Again, thank you so much for the panel and also to David Michaels for moderating this event. We would like to have a photo, if you don't mind, and then later on we have wonderful dishes for you to have lunch. And please, just meet and network and distribute, the business cards. This is the time to ask questions to other panel as well. So we are going to be here until 2 p.m. But if you want to stay later, you're more than welcome. Thank you.
And WikiLeaks is watching you.